Hello, I'm Gigi the Reader, and today I will be doing a review on The Wicked Will Rise by Danielle Page. This is a sequel to Dorothy Must Die, so the main characters are the same. The last book left off with Amy and Ozma being carried off by the wingless monkeys, Maud and Ollie, off to the monkeys' refuge and hideout called Queendom of the Wingless Ones. Maud and Ollie, although wingless, are able to fly with fake wings they had made of newspaper and wire. The wizard had used an enchantment spell to make them take flight with the false wings. Amy and Ozma are being carried away and fleeing a fierce battle she just fought with Dorothy and the Tin Woodsmen at the palace in the Emerald City. They were being carried over the Emerald City that was now in flames. All that Amy could concentrate on was her failure. She had just failed at her second attempt to kill Dorothy. Only this time, this attempt was at a ball, a large party in front of hundreds of guests, and this time she had at least had the assistance and planned intervention of the Revolutionary Order of the Wicked to help, and yet she still failed. But at least Knox was at her side this time, helping, even though Dorothy still managed to escape. I have to add, the Revolutionary Order of the Wicked is headed by the witches Mombi, Gert, who was killed in the last book, Glamora, who is Glinda's twin sister, and Knox, who is a boy that is a fierce fighter and has trained Amy how to fight. There are also other members of the Revolutionary Order throughout the land of Oz. Amy, who was in disguise, was a servant and a maid at the party, had to witness the killing and mutilation of another servant, an undercover order member, at the hands of Dorothy, the Lion, and Scarecrow. All witnesses in front of hundreds of other invited guests. Amy wanted to kill Dorothy right away, but Knox was there in disguise as a servant too. He told her to wait for a signal from the order. Just then they got their signal, and a large explosion went off that shook the palace. Good news is that the order had infiltrated, surrounded, and breached all the Dorothy security enforcements and guards around the palace and in Emerald City. That was Amy and Knox's cue to attack. Dorothy tried to run. She did, to the rooftops where Amy and Knox followed, but like I stated earlier, Dorothy managed to escape. But of course her personal bodyguard, the Tin Woodsman, tried to be the hero in the end by appearing on the ground outside the palace after Amy had survived the fall from the rooftop. The good news is, she did win the battle with the Tin Woodsman. She managed to cut his heart out after defeating him at the advice of the wizard who stood there. Soon after cutting his heart out, the wizard assured Amy that when and if she obtained all three, she'd surely be able to kill Dorothy. All three meaning three objects: the Tin Woodman's heart, which she had. Next, she needed to take the lion's courage. Thirdly, the Scarecrow's brain. Even though Amy wasn't sure she could trust the wizard, she was going to make it next mission to obtain the lion's courage and the Scarecrow's brain. For now, she was on her way to the Queendom of the Wingless with Ozma. When she arrived at the Wingless One's refuge with Ozma, she meets Lulu, who was queen and leader of the Wingless Ones. Amy explained to Lulu that her first priority was now to find out where the rest of the order were mainly. Amy explained to Lulu that her first priority was to find out where the rest of the order were, mainly Mombi, Knox, and Glamora. To find out what the next plan of attack would be, at least how they find or pursue Dorothy. Lulu assured her that she and her subjects had no interest in getting involved in her fight with the Wicked Witches, Dorothy or Glinda. Glinda was as wicked as Dorothy, and they were allies. But Lulu wanted nothing to do with their fight of the Revolutionary Order of the Wicked, but assured her she was safe there at her refuge, and her and Ozma could stay there and rest as long as they wanted. Ozma and Amy are there with the Wingless Ones temporarily. Amy will only stay there until she can find the rest of the members of the Revolutionary Order. Everyone was lost from one another after the battle in Emerald City. After 2 days of staying there, Mombi shows up. Amy right away inquires where everyone else is. Mombi explained that she escaped the burning palace and she used the teleporting spell to teleport herself and Glamour and Nox to safety. She lost Nox and Glamour in a teleportation spell and had no idea where they were. She didn't know where the other members had scattered off either, but she assured her they'd be found sooner or later. Amy updated Mombi on what she'd accomplished since they last saw each other. She had managed to get the Tin Woodsman's heart and the lion's courage by slicing off his tail. She also informed her that the wizard told her she only needed 3 things to defeat and kill Dorothy. She already had 2 things. The last thing she needed was Scarecrow's brain. Mombi told her that was good, but after she had killed Dorothy, she would need to restore Ozma's mind, because Ozma would have to take her rightful throne after Dorothy's death. Remember, Dorothy had put a spell on Ozma when she took over her throne, which left Ozma mentally impaired. But now she needed her to be restored. Dorothy had put a spell on her and left her severely mentally impaired, and when she stole the throne from her. Mombi told Amy that only one person who could lift the curse was another witch by the name of Polychrome. She'd have to find Polychrome. Polychrome lived in the Rainbow Citadel, but no one knew how to find the Rainbow Citadel because it was a land that floated in the clouds and was always constantly moving and shifting from one part of Oz's skies to another. The main reason being to stay hidden from Dorothy and Glamour. So she sent Amy off with Ozma to find the Rainbow Citadel. Before they left, Mombi put a small enchantment spell on Ozma to help Amy. Ozma would act as a sort of compass to guide Amy, so they set off for their journey, leaving Mombi at the Wingless One's refuge to rest. While on their journey, she finds out who Pete is. Pete is a boy who befriended Amy when she first arrived at Oz. He was the one who rescued her from her overturned trailer home when she landed in Oz. Anyway, from time to time, he'd show up and help her. He even contacted Mombi to help her get out of jail when she was locked in Dorothy's palace at the Emerald City. But all Amy knew about him was he worked there as a palace as a gardener. Anyway, we find out that although Mombi had raised Ozma, she wasn't the first to have custody of her. It was the wizard who gave Ozma to Lulu from birth when she was a very small baby. Lulu had raised her for a short time until she gave her Ozma to Mombi to raise. And this is how we find out who Pete is and where he came from. Pete and Ozma are actually the same person. When Mombi took Ozma from Lulu, she placed a spell on her to disguise her. She disguised her as a boy and named him Tipterius. At first, he called himself Tip for short. In creating Tip, she split Ozma's soul. He was an entirely different soul with his own thoughts and feelings and personality. The spell also erased some of Ozma's mind. Tip was able to cut a life out for himself. He wanted his own identity, so he could decide to call himself Pete. Pete was able to take over Ozma most of the time and shapeshift from Ozma to the boy he was, Pete. While on the journey to find Polychrome, Ozma emerged and transformed into Pete. Pete told Amy that his biggest fear was for Ozma to obtain control over her mind, and which would make him totally disappear and exist no more. He begged Amy not to let that happen. She promised, but she lied because she knew she could not keep her promise. Ozma had to regain control of her mind in order to take the throne and rule Oz. Anyway, Pete changed and Ozma emerged again, finally leading Amy to Polychrome's home. Her home was found over a mountain floating in the sky. She lived in a beautiful palace among the clouds. She had a boyfriend who lived there with her named Bright and a pet panther named Heathcliff. She said Heathcliff was a unicorn, but he really wasn't. He did wear a horn that she strapped onto his head. She said it might not have been a real unicorn, but the horn was from a real unicorn. Anyway, if I had mentioned that just before they found Polychrome's home, Nox showed up in the city below where her home was. He said he'd been waiting there for days. He'd been trapped in a sort of limbo when Mombi had lost him in a teleporting spell while fleeing Dorothy's palace. Amy asked about Glamora, but he said he hadn't seen her and she was probably somewhere lost like he was. At any rate, now that Nox, Amy, and Ozma were all together there at the Polychrome's home, surprisingly Polychrome informs Amy that she and Ozma are cousins. She also tells Amy that she can lift a mental spell from Ozma and restore her mind, but she told them it would be better to do it the next day, so she invited them to stay the night at her home, and they did just that. Amy and Ozma shared a room together. That night, Amy was awoken suddenly to a scream. It was Ozma. Amy could see that Pete was trying to emerge. He didn't want Ozma to obtain her senses again because he knew he wouldn't exist anymore. Amy managed to calm Ozma down and keep Pete from emerging, but before the night was over, Amy was awoken again. Ozma's bed was empty, and it was Polychrome yelling that Pete had emerged and betrayed her. He had fled the palace and signaled Glinda and Dorothy to help him. Glinda had showed up and was there with Dorothy. Now Glinda and Dorothy knew where Polychrome's once hidden home was. They all ran outside her palace and saw Glinda and Dorothy standing on a rainbow island near the one Polychrome's palace was on. Suddenly they were in an all-out battle. Polychrome, along with her boyfriend Bright, Amy, Nox, and her pet Heathcliff. The fight was on with Dorothy, Glinda, and the lion. Dorothy had brought the lion with her, even though now he was a cowardly lion because, remember, Amy had sliced his tail off early in the story and took his courage, but Dorothy still forced him to fight. So they were fighting. This is the dumb part of the story. Nox is supposed to be one of the fiercest fighters in the land of Oz. He's trained Amy to fight, but he ended up getting whooped by Dorothy and Glinda. Bright, who was a pretty boy, Bright was Polychrome's boyfriend, couldn't do much but stand out the way and watch the entire battle while Polychrome tried to help Amy fight. The only thing to happen out of the fight, good thing that happened out of the fight, was Amy managed to chop off the lion's head, so she killed the lion. But it was only popping because somehow between pages 251 and 252, Nox managed to get knocked the hell out. He got knocked smooth out while Dorothy and Glinda killed Polychrome and Heathcliff. So Polychrome ended up getting killed along with her pet panther Heathcliff. Nox got smooth, like I say, got knocked smooth out. Couldn't do nothing. Amy did most of the fighting. What the hell? Daniel Page, I don't know what she was doing. Anyway, on top of that, plus Dorothy steals the tail and the heart from Amy. And on top of that, they kidnap Ozma. The story takes a turn in the worst way. Not only have Amy and Nox gotten Polychrome and her pet panther Heathcliff killed, Ozma abducted, and now Amy and Nox's weak ass managed to lose two of the most important things she needs to supposedly defeat Dorothy. Okay. So Amy straight lost the tail and the heart, but Bright takes the strap on the horn off of Heathcliff and gives it to Amy. He said it may be of use to her one day. Yeah, alright. So we move on, and it's just Amy and Nox's punk ass traveling together. They're searching for a way back to Mombi so they can find out what to do next. They come to a wall. Amy breaks the yellow brick wall down with her powers and finds the Emerald City on the other side. And the Emerald City looks terrible. It's torn up from the battle of the Revolutionary Order of the Wicked had with Dorothy and Glinda. Lulu was there with some more of the wingless monkeys. The wingless ones monkeys. She said that they were there because she heard there was trouble in the city. She told Amy she had been looking for her because Mombi had disappeared from the wingless one's refuge. Nox and Amy were just as confused as she was. Amy, Lulu, and Nox looked at the palace, and it looked tall and big as if it was growing. So Amy and Nox walked over to the palace to investigate. At the door of the palace was the Scarecrow. He walked towards them. He tried to speak but made no sense, just a lot of babbling and mumbling. His head looked lopsided and deflated. It was clear that Dorothy had gotten to him. She'd taken the third thing the wizard had spoken of, the Scarecrow's brain. Amy looked at him as he kept speaking. She tried to conjure up a magical flame to destroy the Scarecrow, but for some reason her magic wasn't working, so she reached out, squeezed him by the neck until only a gurgle came out, and then he was dead. The Scarecrow was no longer a threat. After that, her and Knox entered the palace. Everything was arrayed, torn up, upside down, with weeds and plants growing inside. Staircases were upside down, going in different directions. She suspected that Dorothy had put some sort of weird curse or enchantment on the palace. Then suddenly she saw Dorothy. She was running up a set of staircases while pulling Ozma along with her. She suddenly ducked into a room with Ozma. She had spotted Amy and Knox and was running and hiding. Amy couldn't keep up with all the different stairwells and doors so she grabbed Knox's hand and tried to catch up with Dorothy through a shadow realm. She appears right behind Dorothy and Ozma. She spies them as they duck through one last doorway that leads to her garden maze. Amy follows, but she's alone now. Knox had gotten lost somehow in a teleport spell she used to catch up with Dorothy. So she followed Ozma and Dorothy into the middle of the maze. They couldn't see her because she shrouded herself in a misdirection charm. So lo and behold, as she spied them entering the maze, who was there? The no good Two-Faced Wizard of Oz. He was there waiting on Dorothy. Amy listened as she found out he had been working with Dorothy the entire time and lying to Amy. The wizard had been lying to Amy while he was pitting them against each other for the three things: the lion's tail, the Tin Woodman's heart, and the Scarecrow's brain. It seems he told Dorothy the same thing he had told Amy, but he didn't care who gotten them first. He just wanted to get these things from whoever he could get them from first, and he had devised to Dorothy to bring Ozma to him. The wizard had an evil, diabolical plan, and it all unfolded right before Amy and Dorothy's eyes. As Amy was spying and listening to the wizard tell Dorothy his next step, he loudly announced that he knew Amy was there, shrouded and hiding under a misdirection spell. He calls for her to come out. Amy does, and she stands next to Dorothy. Neither Dorothy nor Amy try to fight each other because now the wizard has them up both under a calming enchantment spell. They are both in sort of a drunken stupor. Amy's magic is not working, and neither is Dorothy's. They couldn't fight each other if they wanted to. The wizard has them both just as he wants them and where he wants them. He tells them both to sit and he takes the brain, tail, and heart from Dorothy. They both have a seat at his feet on two stools. They watch as he magically suspends the three items in mid-air. While he instructs Ozma to stand next to him, he explains what he's about to do. He explains by asking Dorothy and Amy, have they ever noticed the shape of the state of Kansas on a map? He points out that Oz is shaped like Kansas, and they are the same size. He explained they are the same size, except Oz draws its magic and life's blood from Kansas and feeds off of Kansas. The wizard says he's going to merge the two together and put himself in charge over it. He says the real reason he planned on Amy to get all three things was not for her to defeat Dorothy, but for himself. He was using them to conjure up a spell to merge the two places. He'd be king over everything. He was going to make Ozma his queen. So as he said that, he began to lift Dorothy's spell off of Ozma. Slowly, Ozma started to turn into her true fairy form. She sprouted wings and started to flutter into the air next to the wizard. Next, a large whirling black vortex appeared above them. As it grew in size, as a cyclone began to form, except it was upside down funnel. Then oddly, it looked like an upside down tornado. He commanded Dorothy and Amy to stand. Now the wizard had everything he needed in place that he needed. As Amy and Dorothy stood there, he said he needed one more ingredient to complete his ritual: blood. He then handed Amy a knife and announced out loud, I'll let you do the honors. It's time to for Dorothy to die. Amy was in a trance, and Dorothy didn't try to run or fight. She was still in the trance under the wizard had put on her. Just as Amy drew the knife back, she heard a voice yell out, "Don't do it. It's a trick. He's fooling you." It was Knox. He had found Amy and was pushing through the maze hedges. The wizard hissed, "Do it. Do it now." Osmond was still there and started to wail in agony, but Pete was there now. He tumbled across the cobblestone, jumped up, and grabbed the wizard's throat. Amy blinked and dropped her knife. Dorothy emerged from her trance. They were all there. They were all from under his spell. "Traitor!" Dorothy yelled out. She walked over to the wizard and said, "I should have done this long ago. Now let's hear you scream." He did scream. She clapped her hands together. His body began to ripple and twitch as Dorothy's spell moved through him, and then it was like something was eating him from the inside. "No, help me. Amy, help." But it was nothing she could do. Then an explosion of blood and guts. The wizard was no more. But fortunately, the story does not end there. It goes on and gets even more bizarre. So anyway, the upside down tornado still swirling above them. Amy and Dorothy were picked up by the force, and they were both back in Kansas at Dusty Acres Trailer Park where Amy lived. Except there were no trailers there. They stood on a slab of concrete in the barbecue area of the park. Everything else was gone. The area was smoky with flames and scattered in different spots. Suddenly, 3 cloaked witches showed up. They were Mombi, Glamora, and oddly enough, Gert. Gert, who Amy thought was dead, was alive. They all had on different color cloaks, red, gold, and blue. A purple cloak laid on the ground. At this point, it looked like another ritual was about to take place, because all 3 witches were there from the Revolutionary Order of Witches. Another person was about to be confirmed into the order as a bona fide witch. Glamora picked up the purple cloak and announced, "Arise, little witch, take your place among us. You've been training for this your whole life. You knew we'd ask you to do this. It's time." Amy was thinking, okay, but she wasn't sure what this meant when she said she'd been training her whole life, but she was thinking in her head, okay. And as she stepped forward, it seemed that Glamora was looking past her. Suddenly, Amy heard her voice say, "I know," and it was Knox out of nowhere, and he was stepping forward, reaching for the cloak. He continued, "I was hoping it wouldn't be for a while." Okay. What the hell, Danielle? I'm talking to the author right now. This is crazy. In her embarrassment, Glamora wasn't even talking to Amy. She was talking to Knox. Because Amy was standing there thinking she about to be initiated as a bona fide witch. And she talking to Knox. Remember, this is the same Knox that got knocked smooth out fighting with Polychrome, and she got killed. He was fighting Glenda and Dorothy. But anyway, how in the hell was Knox being confirmed into the order as a witch and not Amy? But even though Amy had failed to kill Dorothy, what had Knox accomplished? So he wasn't even able to fight Dorothy and Glenda, who ended up killing Polychrome and Heathcliff. At least Amy managed to kill the 10 Woodsmen and the lion and the scarecrow. Of course, Amy was pissed, but she had realized what had happened. It was Knox who was being initiated into the order and not her. In that same moment, she realized Dorothy. She looked around for Dorothy. Dorothy, she thought with a flash of fear. Where was she? If Knox and I come through the wizard's porthole, she had been close by. She looked around and didn't see her. Mombi, Knox, Glamora had realized the same thing. Then there was a loud booming sound across the gray landscape. Then a crackling, a blue lightning. After all that, to quote Amy, and then I saw the crumbled form lying in the dirt on the far side of the witches. I didn't have to guess who it was. Red shoes, pulsing with a dull throbbing light that hurt my eyes, gave her away. It was Dorothy. Her checkered dress was torn and dirty, and her arms and legs were covered in dirt and bloody scratches, but her shoes still glowed with a sickly red light. Quickly now, the hooded witch said urgently. While she's still weak, it was Gert. She was alive. Amy yelled out, "Gert, but you're dead." Gert yelled out, "No time to explain right now. We'll never have a chance to destroy Dorothy like this again." So Mombi, Gert, Glamora, and Knox joined hands and started to chat. Amy tried to summon her magic, but there was nothing there. Dorothy was sitting up looking at her hands in confusion and was discovering the same thing. Neither Amy nor Dorothy had magical powers in Kansas because they both were from Kansas. Neither had ability to tap into their powers in Kansas. They were both there powerless, completely powerless. As Gert, Glamora, Mombi, and Knox continued to chat, they yelled out to Amy to help, and she yelled out, "I can't." Then Dorothy yelled out, "We're in Kansas. You brought me back to Kansas, and I hate Kansas." She struggled to get to her feet, and the witch's spell dimmed as her shoes began to glow even more fiercely. She flicked her fingers, but her magic didn't appear. She evidently still had her magic shoes. So she yelled out, "I want my palace back. I want my power. I want my dresses." She looked down at the red shoes, and they blazed with a brilliant crimson light. "No," Gert yelled out, "stop her." As Dorothy's shoes radiated light and power, then Dorothy yelled, "Take me home. Please, shoes, take me home." With a sharp pop, Dorothy vanished. Dorothy had gone home, and they were stuck in Kansas. Okay. Really? So in the last chapter, since they were all stuck in Kansas, Mombi and Glamora quickly popped up a magical tent. The tent contained lamps and comfortable furniture and a buffet with plenty of food. But Amy was furious as she asked everyone question after question. What just happened? Just like me, I have questions too, because this book gets more and more confusing the closer we get to the end. More stuff happens in the last 10 pages than it happens in the whole book. But anyway, Knox responded to Amy saying, "That was too much. It's too much to tell you, Amy. You know the order has always had to keep secrets to survive." Amy was angry and walked away from him. Glamora, Mombi, and Gert sat at the table and began to eat. Amy yelled, "How can you just sit there? How was Gert still alive? What just happened back there? What are we doing in Kansas? And how do we get back to Oz? And why can't I use my magic?" Mombi put down her fork and looked at Dorothy and said, "You can't use your magic?" "No," she yelled. Not here. It's just gone somehow." "But that's not the point. You owe me answers. I'm tired of being jerked around. You obviously know a lot more than I do. What's going on here?" "That's not entirely true," Gert said, "but I understand your confusion. I know this has to be difficult. It would be less difficult if you would just tell me what the hell was going on." Amy is heated. So then Gert said, "You asked how I'm still alive. The truth is I never died. But I saw you. You were dead. I saw you when you died." Gert answered, "But witches are very, very difficult to kill. When the lion won, everything went dark for me for a long time. It was as though I was wandering through some kind of shadow country. Anyway, I wasn't in the Darklands. I don't think. There's a lot I don't know about this place. As far as I know, I was here in this clearing the whole time." Gert explained fully but she was alive now. Amy responded, You were in a trailer park?" Gert answered, "I don't know what that is, but I couldn't leave this area. No, it was awful. But eventually my magic was strong enough for me to get a message to Mombi and Glamora. They used the breakdown between the worlds to join me here." So Amy had some idea of how Gert, Mombi, and Glamora ended up in Kansas, but her and Knox came through the portal that the wizard had conjured up. Dorothy had came through the same portal, but now her shoes had taken her back to Oz, and they were all still stuck there in Kansas. Then Mombi went on to update Amy on the rest of the order. The order had been scattered across Oz. Half the soldiers we trained back in the caverns are dead. Others, we know where some of them are, but they are too spread out to do any good anymore. What we did out there makes Knox one of us, the wicked witch of the East, essentially. So they initiated Knox and made him the Wicked Witch of the East because so much of the order was missing now. They had to restore and secure Oz again, but they had their hopes pinned on Amy killing Dorothy. Then Amy realized, but I can't kill Dorothy because we're linked somehow. So you have to do it yourselves. Mommy nodded, not to mention the fact that Dorothy just teleported herself back to Oz and we're stuck here. Mommy explained that they initiated Knox as a wicked witch because when you join the order, there's no going back. Now he could never leave the order or have a normal life. Now he was bound to Oz and responsible for the future of Oz. He could never leave or have a family. Finally, Gert tells Dorothy, of course you still have a place with us if you want it, but we're in Kansas, Amy. We'll find a way to get back to Oz, and once we're there, we can defeat Dorothy without you. You can go home. Amy thought to herself, home? I could go home. And that was the last words in the book. Okay. Now I'm gonna have to read the sequel to this because this ended. We gotta look at her. What really? This is a messed up ending. Put her picture up. We're gonna look at Danielle Page so I can look at her and say, really? Okay. Look at with that head tilt. She know we're gonna have to go out and buy Yellow Brick War. I already bought Yellow Brick War, so it's a little bit more exciting than the first book with the Dorothy Must Die. But I just don't like the ending. I don't like, so I'm going to get this one, rate this 4 out of 5. But I've already bought, and Miss Danielle Page know what she's doing. I've already bought Yellow Brick War, which is the sequel to this story. So, because now we all have to know. At least I know I have to know what the heck happens and how they get back to Oz. I can't imagine all of them being stuck in Kansas. It's like a switch. It's weird because it's always been Dorothy and Amy. Dorothy stuck in Oz, but she went back to Oz, and then Amy got swept up in Oz. But Oz weird because half the people that was running part of Oz are in Kansas, so they know we want to know. But anyway, thank you for listening. And my next review will be The Yellow Brick War, which is a sequel to this book. Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe.